get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Starting this week, we're kicking off our Blue Onion weekly webinar. Each week on Wednesday, we'll bring you topics and discussions of new technology, product update, market trend, and guest speakers from the e-commerce industry. Tune in at noon Eastern Time to catch the webinar weekly. Before we get started, some housekeeping logistics. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to it after the presentation. Today, we are inviting our CEO and co-founder from Blue Onion, Lyndsey Bunting, to share her experience tackling reconciliations in e-commerce. A quick background, Lyndsey was a former VP of Finance from Birchbox and CFO from Resonance. Lyndsey, take the mic.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. We're super excited for the weekly webinar series and so excited for everybody to join us today. So we'll just jump right in. We'll talk a little bit about the product, sort of, why we built Blue Onion, and we'll also have time for Q&A. So just to kick things off. So essentially, consumer transactions used to be simple. I always like to start with this and give an example of sort of how things have changed. So if you imagine, even 20 years ago, right? Like you could walk into a store, maybe in the mall, you might buy a $10 item with cash, and then you leave, and that store has $10 in their cash register, and that transaction is complete. But we are living in a much different era today, where there is a lot more complexity for companies, both big and small, especially for e-commerce merchants. This is just a screenshot of the Shopify App Store, where there are over 6,000 apps today. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of those applications touch different pieces of the customer purchasing journey. And so if you think about, even in just let's say a typical e-commerce transaction, the customer adds something to their cart on your website. Maybe they apply a discount code. Maybe you have them pay for shipping, depending on where they live, right? And where you have Nexus, then there's also sales tax that's added there. Maybe they decide to partially pay with a gift card or loyalty points. And then maybe you offer various methods of payment. So let's say it could be a credit card, it could be PayPal, it could be buy now, pay later. And so you begin to think about this transaction that used to be really simple, right? But it's becoming increasingly complex. And then on top of all of that, when you actually receive the money in the bank account, it's a few days later. So it's not sort of in that instant moment like it is if you go to the mall and pay with cash. And it also depends, right, on the payoff cutoff time for each of those payment processors. And it doesn't say, here's this $10, cash settlement from Jane. It might say, here is this $152,000 and 33-cent payment that sort of dropped into your bank account. And there's fees and chargebacks and all these other things that are included in there that can be very difficult to sort of piece apart. And so all of this to say is that, this doesn't even take into account if somebody wants to return that item and what the refund process looks like. And so, again, this is just becoming a lot more complex. And it becomes more complex as the company grows, but we're also seeing that complexity a lot earlier on. So we're seeing a lot of our merchants, we work with over 200 merchants today. They might have multiple Shopify stores. They might sell in lots of different channels. So they might also sell on Amazon, as an example. Sometimes they want to accept in different currencies, right? And they can do that because it's an e-commerce store. And then we're also seeing multiple payment methods, which I think is really interesting. So back during my time at Birchbox, we had one payment processor, and that was hard enough to reconcile with the volume of transactions. But now we're seeing our clients offer anywhere from, let's say, 5 to 10 different payment methods, whether that is, what I mentioned earlier, buy now, pay later, PayPal, different, I would say like Global E as an example, if they want to go across border. So there's lots of different payment options today because merchants are trying to meet consumers, where they are and how they want to pay. The other thing that's making this increasingly complex, really the return services, gift cards, loyalty programs, all of those things that you might not think about initially as payment methods are really just adding to the complexity. All right, so what does that mean, for our customers? Is that accessing that data to report sales and revenue and close the books just is becoming increasingly time consuming. And so, a lot of times we'll ask our clients how they're solving this today, and we'll get, a giant Excel workbook that may or may not open, has like tons of tabs in it. And that this bank reconciliation process can really take multiple days. Sometimes they hire, either somebody part-time or full-time just to like do this on a daily or weekly basis. So this is something that is, it takes a lot of the team's time. And all of that, to say is that a lot of that work isn't even available until the end of the month or after month end, depending on how quickly you can close the books. And then anytime marketing, for example, or the revenue team adds a new payment processor, let's say they want to offer Facebook, that it now requires a whole new process or reworking of the existing process to really be able to address those new payment methods. So it is just getting to this point now where, nobody really enjoys this type of work, and it's taking more and more time because the data set is becoming larger and larger. And I just love this quote. I use it all the time, but this is from McKinsey, who did a report on, FP&A, but essentially the teams are really dealing with more and more data that really does require reconciliation and consolidation before it can even be useful, right? So not only to close the books and to be able to present monthly financials, but be able to use those things for forecasting and business plans and analyses, right? Because I'm sure a lot of us have heard like, oh, I'm using this revenue number, and somebody else is like, I'm using this revenue number. And so, the source of truth really exists within accounting. And so how can we help teams reconcile the data so that everybody's sort of working off of the same set of numbers? So how do we help? So Blue Onion was really built specifically for e-commerce accounting teams. We want to help around the organization and the ability of these teams to scale as their business grows. So essentially what we offer is really just this repository of, it's a place for you to go where you have all of your orders, all of your payments, all of your bank payouts, all in one place. And we are doing the reconciliation for you automatically. And so we also generate journal entries that can be used as part of your close process. We're also flagging any anomalies that might require attention. And so a lot of times, again, the reconciliation process really is to help identify where there might be like cash lossiness or any leakage, but it's really hard, right? If you wait until the end of the month and then maybe notice that, 3 weeks have gone by and sort of we're losing money in a certain area. And so we're able to help you do that and identify those issues a lot earlier. And then the last piece is just easily handle new integrations. And so this is what I mentioned earlier, but if marketing wants to go and try, a new payment method, we are able to essentially, as long as we have that integration built, put that into the app. And so there's not really much for you to do there. And then the ability to try and experiment on whether it's different currencies or with different payment processors. The other thing I'll say is that, coming from finance and accounting and having gone through an ERP implementation, that was a really horrific experience. So it was something that took, I think it was like 18 months. It cost, $2 million. It was a massive undertaking. When we built Blue Onion, we specifically, said like, this is something that needs to be really easy to set up. And so, and it needs to not require any engineering resources, because that is what was always really difficult for me to get. So essentially the way the process works today is that you can get set up in 30 minutes or less. All we need is the admin on the different, order and payment methods that you use, and we'll walk you through that setup process. So this is not by any means like a crazy full ERP implementation. And so as we think about, the ROI on the product, obviously the first one is how can you save your team time, right? On these manual tasks that they're doing. Nobody really loves doing this piece of it, but it's just something that has to be done every month to close the book. So we obviously, save you a ton of time there. The other thing is that I mentioned, we identify areas of cash loss. So we see this, more frequently, I think, than maybe we would expect, but, are things getting accounted for correctly? Is there some cash lossiness that's occurring? One example I love to give is customer service for one of our clients. was initiating refunds directly in the payment processor. And so the team kept thinking, we're going to receive this cash, but they were underreporting refunds. And so when they got to the end of the year, there was just this giant amount on the balance sheet for basically cash in transit that they actually weren't expecting to receive. So, and they may have made some different decisions if they sort of knew that that was the refund rate, right? And so I think there's that. And again, experimenting with new payment methods. So if your team wants to, try, Afterpay, for example, we can do that. And again, really easy to work into the existing workflow with Blue Onion. And then the ones that are a little bit harder to maybe quantify, but I like to include those, improve decision making with updated data. And I'll also say data that everybody's using the same numbers for, because that is something that I just encountered over and over again. That was such a challenge, right? Like inventory planning might be using a different number, marketing's using a different number, finance and accounting's using a different number. So how can we make sure we're all on the same page and we all have access to much more real-time data that we can make better decisions with instead of waiting 5, 10, 15 days after month end. The second piece is have confidence in key financial data. So anytime an audit, a diligence process used to come up, I would just get so anxious about that because I knew that this was just going to be such an undertaking. And so, in order to be audit ready, but also have confidence in the data that you're presenting to key stakeholders, whether that's leadership team, whether it's investors, board members, like, that it's good and it's right, because again, we're going all the way to cash to do the reconciliation. All right, so let me just jump into the demo. Give me 1 second. Hold it up. All right. Okay. So Blue Onion. So when you start with us, and I just like to start with this screen on the integrations, because again, it's really easy to set up. We have apps for a lot of the order systems, payment processors, and then we also connect to the bank account. And so again, if you think about if you have a manual process today, downloading lots of CSV files, trying to tie all of those together, maybe with like VLOOKUPs, and then looking at the bank rec, maybe in NetSuite or in QuickBooks, like it's just a lot of different things to manage and sources of data to bring together. And so that's essentially what we're doing here. Again, less than 30 minutes to get up and running, and we walk you through that process. So again, pretty lightweight. And then here we have the overview tab. So what I'll say is that we have, again, total sales and then shipped revenue. This product, because, coming from a finance and accounting background, was really built specifically for finance and accounting teams. And so the question that we always use, whether it's around customer success or product, is really like, how can we better serve our clients? So how can we better come with the lens of finance and accounting to make your workflow better? And so everything we do here is really accrual basis. And so you can see here's everything that was sold, here's everything that was shipped, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we have this reconciliation status on both the orders, the refunds, and then revenue recognized by things that happen in period versus out of period. Reconciliation here just refers to, I see the order in the order system. So Shopify, for example, can I find a corresponding payment? And then ultimately, can I see how and when that settled into the bank account here? And then down here, this is just a visualization. So this sort of gives you a quick snapshot of, how things are going, how things are reconciling, and then what the order flow looks like. What I will say about the product, so a couple things. So if you look over on the sidebar here, we have a lot of our summary pages up here, and then you'll see a drop down for source data. And so one of the things that was really important for us is that any number that you see in the app, you can click into, you can drill down into, and you can see all of the transaction level detail behind it. Because I'm like, sure as everybody knows on this call, anyone who has a finance and accounting background, like it's not enough, right, to just be able to show the summary number. You really have to be able to prove at a transaction level what's happening here. And so all of our numbers on the summary pages then link back to source data pages here. And the heart of the product, I'll say, is the journal entries page. And again, building specifically with accounting and finance in mind. And again, these are just, I would say, recommended journal entries. Everybody's a little bit different. So it's, I'll say people use it in two ways. Some people are like, this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to download these journal entries, and this is, what I'm going to put into, whether it's QuickBooks, for example, into my accounting system. We have other people that use this page to say, okay, I'm going to use this to orient myself around some of these key data points. And so it's really up to you how you want to use it. You can choose different dates. So if you needed to do a mid-month close, for example, or you wanted to do it weekly, that option is available to you as well. The other thing we're really excited to roll out I would say in the next month or two, we're going to have journal entry grouping and chart of account mapping. So you'll be able to now customize more on the journal entries page to, again, try and make it more helpful for your workflow process here. And the other thing, again, being able to click on every number here and seeing all of the transaction level detail. So you can now see, okay, here's this order, here's all the financials associated with this order, here's what was reconciled, here's what's unreconciled, and then different payment sources here as well. There are also, and again, true for all of the source data pages, lots of amazing, fun, configurable columns. So depending on what you're looking for, we have all of that source data here. And let's say I want to see, I want to see the discount code associated with this, or if there's an exchange rate or fulfillment date, I can pull all of that information in here. And then also the ability to download into CSV. And so now we have, at a really high level, all of the sales, we have refunds, and then we basically break that down by what you would expect by accounts receivable or by payment processor here. So at the top, we can see we generated some revenue, we issued some refunds, and here's sort of net by payment processor, what I would expect to see. And then just quickly going down, so then we also show revenue recognition. So assuming that the company or your company is pushing fulfillment data back into Shopify, we will be able to catch that fulfillment information and dates. So if I just go to, let's do here. So I'm on the order line item summary here, and I can see a couple of things. So I want to see everything that was fulfilled in this period. I want to group it by maybe title, SKU, product type, even discount code. I can do that here. And so again, the ability to say, okay, I want to see more detail. Maybe I only want to see what was ordered at, or certain order tags here to, again, how can this help me close the books faster? So revenue recognition on the order line item summary for more detail. And then the other thing too, deferred revenue. So let me just do this. And then we can see here, right? So I can see everything that was ordered, how it was fulfilled over time. I can also see cancellations, how those cancellations happened over time, and then what is still remaining to be fulfilled as of this date. And again, the goal here was to say, like, if I'm looking at my, balance sheet to see what was my deferred revenue, can I understand sort of everything that's included? And again, being able to click in here, seeing all of that transaction level detail. And so this can be helpful for both the accounting team, but also sometimes the operations team as well. If there's like a large chunk of things that have aged basically that you wouldn't expect, that maybe just need to be canceled out or actually fulfilled. And so we have all of the shipping information. The other thing we do, and again, this is why it's built specifically for e-commerce companies, but the other thing that we'll do is we'll just note anything that's complementary. And so all we mean by that is this what, was this order 100% discounted? In which case we'll just identify that for you so you can set it aside if you want to and pull that out of Shopify and discounts or revenue and discounts. And if you wanted to, right, like you could then book it at cost, maybe under a marketing expense, for example. All right. And then we have the cash receipt side here. So anytime you see cash, this truly means what's settled into the bank account. And so again, you'll be able to see, and we'll show a different view in here. Let's go. We have what we call a payout summary. And so essentially what we're doing here is we're creating a mini bank account statement for all of the relevant settlements. So you can see, here I settled $1,200 from Shopify or $2,300 from Shopify. Can I click in and see everything that was associated with that payout? And so now I can see when I click in there, I can see every single order. I can see the fees, the gross amount, the net amount here. And I can also see how that payment sort of traveled over time, right? So the order was placed, it looks like 1/9, same time the authorization happened. The payment processor said it was available and paid out 1/10, but really the bank didn't receive it until 111. And so this is, again, just a great example of like how we can just make sure that we're tracing the transaction across multiple systems, like very granularly. And you'll also see on this page 2 reconciliation statuses. So one is the order reconciliation status, the other is bank. What we mean by that is we say, I see the order in the order system. Can I find a corresponding payment in the payment processor? If that's true, then this first column will show up as reconciled. And then the second piece is I see the payment in the payment processor. Can I find where it settled into the bank account? If the answer is yes, then that piece is reconciled. The reason we do this is because we see, again, breakage at different points in time where, let's say, again, maybe I see the payment and I can see it settle into the bank account, but maybe I'm not able to connect that back to an order. Or, and same thing on the refund side. So this sort of helps us identify with you, where are some of these breakages occurring? Is there a certain type of transaction? Do you need to go back and revisit some processes there? And again, so we'll pull out all of the merchant fees here. In the demo account, we have a lot of different lines for Amazon seller, but that's really just because they have a lot of different expenses basically that get pulled out of each of those payouts here. So you can see there's an advertising fee, they remit sales tax on your behalf, there's a reserve balance, and then chargebacks here. So we basically account for all of those things because without them, we wouldn't be able to say, here's actually what settled into the bank account here. And so we'll just scroll back up. And then the last page that I'll just cover quickly is this cash in transit page. So we recently launched this. We're super excited about this. This is really just a summary of what you just saw at the journal entries page. So we see all of the sales, the refunds, any non-cash payment methods. So gift cards, exchange credit, store credit. Again, something else that can be really challenging just to be able to account for. We have that information here. And then we break that down right by payment processor here. And so then what we have down here is, okay, so in this period, I generated, $28,000 in basically new AR. Of that 28, I received 21 in the same period. And so as of, let's just say 2/28, I have $7,500 that's still in transit. And then you also have your chargeback amounts here. And so again, this is just another way to help say like, okay, what's on the balance sheet? Is that also reflected, in here? And am I close? If not, where are things maybe falling off? And so I would say that is, so I think there was a lot of information. I would say maybe the key things to really take away, sort of really 2 elements to the core product. One is the order to cash reconciliation process, right? I see the order. Can I find it in the bank account to help me with bank rec? So that is a huge chunk of the product. The second piece is really around revenue recognition, deferred revenue, looking at that in more granular detail with line item summary, for example. And so maybe, I know that was a really quick run through, but maybe if people have questions, happy to jump into those.
Great, Lyndsey. So we definitely do have a couple questions on the chat box. So one is, I really struggle to understand my Amazon payouts and all the fees they charge. Can Blue Onion help with that?
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. And so just to maybe give an example here. So if I click, I'm on this payouts page, which is basically the mini recreation of your bank statement. I can click on this, and now I can see all of the different transactions associated with Amazon. And you'll also have the type in here. So you'll be able to see fulfillment, advertising, merchant fees, and then the description in case you want to parse them in a different way. The other way to see that is on the journal entries page, if you just want to look at it sort of in aggregate here, and you'll be able to see, here's all of the fees associated with the Amazon seller. There's any reversal reimbursements, shipping, advertising, remitted sales tax, fulfillment, reserve balances. We have all of that information in here, so it becomes a lot easier because I know it can be a lot to break out that Amazon seller payout.
Awesome. So leading to the second question, you mentioned return services earlier. How does Blue Onion help with those?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so it depends. Each return service, I'll say, is slightly different. And so what we're primarily focused on, I'll say for Returnly and for Loop, is just to say, because a lot of the way they work is around gift cards and using gift cards to essentially account for those different refunds. So there's a couple different steps. So I think we have some documentation that we can share on each of those if there's one that's particularly interesting. But you would essentially see, and what we're sort of missing on the demo account here, is you would see lines for like gift cards redeemed, gift cards issued, for example, whether that might be for Returnly or for a Loop as another example. And so you'd be able to see, here's gift cards that were issued, here's what were expired, and here's what were redeemed. And so going through to help with that reconciliation process.
Awesome. So we have some, I would say, a broader question. So many e-commerce companies are still practicing cash-based accounting. Would you recommend them changing to accrual base? And what are the benefits?
Yeah, Judy, that's a great question. I would say it depends. So, and again, everybody is a little bit different. I would say any company that's of like a meaningful size, probably helpful to think more about accrual basis. And really what I mean by that is, and again, because we see some of our smaller companies say like, we're not going to defer revenue, we're just going to recognize it sort of as it's ordered. I would say a couple of things around that would be, one, if there's a lag between when something is ordered and when something is shipped, I would recommend the deferral or using deferred revenue, mostly because otherwise it can get like very lumpy depending on sort of what that looks like for folks. I would say that's really the big thing, is being able to have a really accurate view of what revenue recognition looks like over time. The other thing I'll say about that too is we usually, for most companies, right, unless you're maybe like a furniture company or your company does a lot of customization that basically increases the time between order and shipment. The other time we see a big impact of that really is around holiday, right? So if you think about like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, depending on how they fall, November and December can start to look a little bit wonky there. I would say those are really the biggest considerations. If you don't need to go through an audit or a diligence process, it could potentially make sense to hold off a little bit longer. And the other thing that was new, I think, for COVID was people had a lot of supply chain issues too. So if you also end up doing a lot of pre-sales or have just timing issues again between like when somebody orders something and when you can actually ship it, probably helpful to just use that deferred revenue bucket.
Awesome. The last one is, what is the one piece of accounting or finance advice you will provide to leaders in the e-commerce companies right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I will say, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but having worked with a lot of different e-commerce companies, I think there's a couple things. So one is, don't wait too long to get your books in order, which is a mistake for sure that I've made and some of the companies where I've been have made, where then it becomes like this emergency to try and get things done and to pass the audit, to do the fundraising process, to go through, diligence. So like having good processes early on that allow for flexibility and don't become a blocker later, I think are really important. The other things I'll say, I used to say this is, there are a couple things, if you got these things right, you are going to be in great shape, right? Like if you have good unit economics, good gross margins, amazing. If you can acquire customers, sustainably, so you have a good, LTV to CAC ratio, great. And then if you don't hire too many people, you will be in good shape. And then the last piece is really around inventory management. And this is actually the one where I see people wait the longest, maybe, to think about hiring somebody. But if you think about it, those are sort of your biggest buckets of spend, is my guess, is product, people, and marketing. And so making sure that you have good processes, guardrails, accounting for those things sooner rather than later can put you in a really good position. If those things go off the rails, it can be really difficult to sort of rein them back in and build the good practices. So if you're smaller, I just highly recommend like thinking about those things, like maybe more than you would maybe give consideration to. But just as the company grows, it just becomes harder and harder, to get those things back in line if you wait too long.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lyndsey.
Yeah.
I think that's all for now, and then we'll keep looking out for new questions coming in.
Awesome. And then the other thing, let me just pull this up, that I'll say here, just while we have maybe a few minutes. So I mentioned that we work with over 200 brands and accounting firms. So we are super proud of some of the amazing companies that we work with. So, and also the accounting partners that we have, they have been absolutely amazing, and we're super proud of them. And also just, again, the teams on these companies, along with many others, but really helping them as, you know, they're sort of innovating on the revenue and customer side, being able to support them in their journey. And the other thing that I'll just say is that, you know, I love to talk to other finance and accounting people. So if you guys, I have included my personal phone number, my personal email address here. I'm always happy to chat, whether, you know, it's about Blue Onion, or if you just have like other random finance and accounting questions, I'm happy to just have a conversation with you. If you are interested in a consultation and you want to learn more to see if maybe we could be a fit for your company, feel free to reach out to sales@blueonionlabs.com as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Lyndsey. I know there's a lot of information to be digested, and we'll definitely follow up with more sessions upcoming in the coming weeks to just dive into a little bit more details. I hear a lot of practice and use cases that we can use across team, no matter from a marketing side like myself, and then to operations, to other like great practices that we can share with other people. So stay tuned. We're going to come back in a week, and then next week we'll be introducing a new topic, and soon we'll be inviting new speakers and guest speakers to join us. So we'll stay tuned and follow our LinkedIn, as we will share more news on there. Thanks, everybody.